And welcome to Whiskey Politics. I'm Dave Sussman, your host and purveyor here at Whiskey Politics. You can find me at davesussman.com. You can also find us at several platforms, including theindependent.io. You can also find us at the Range Broadcasting Network, of course, always on YouTube. Please hit the subscribe button. And all of your favorite podcast applications, including Apple iTunes, or Apple Podcasts, they are now called, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, and of course, always at the Ricochet Network. If you're not on Ricochet, you're missing some great conversation over there as well. So definitely check out ricochet.com. A lot of news this week. One of the things that I'm always taking a look at is to see, whether or not we sometimes overemphasize news because there's just so much of it. And then within 24 to 48 hours, we kind of move on to something else. But we got a new presidential candidate this week, Kamala Harris. And while the mainstream media wrote her off 5 or 6 months ago, calling her basically ineffective, inauthentic, I think is a word that has been thrown out a lot. She just basically puts her finger up in the wind and see which way is it blowing before she gives you an opinion. They are now lauding her praises. This is identity politics, folks. And to discuss this all today, we've got two great guests, a twofer for you. We've got writer, author, stand-up comedian, speechwriter to President Donald Trump and to the Hollywood stars, Evan Sayet. His latest book, The Woke Supremacy. Great title for a book that I was very fortunate to have read a couple of months ago now, before it actually came out. An Anti-Socialist Manifesto. Evan basically gives us a historical perspective about how we got to where we are today with today's left. It's fascinating. We're going to talk about that, plus some of the breaking news about what is going on with politics, whether it is Kamala Harris, whether it is the Durham report that is now just starting to trickle out, and we're starting to see some situations we're going to talk about. And then we're delighted to have come back, I think he was on our radio show, Joe Collins, who is running for the 43rd Congressional District in Southern California. Yeah, you may know that congressional district because that is where the finance chairwoman, Maxine Waters, resides and has been residing. Actually, you know what? She doesn't reside there. She resides in a $4.3 million home at Hancock Park, as my good friend Ken Emmons calls the Maxi Pad. Joe Collins is going to be joining us and talking about what is going on in California, as well as nationwide, and what his intentions are for the great district of South Central Los Angeles. But first, we're going to be bringing on Evan Sayet, author of his latest book, The Woke Supremacy. And to welcome back to the show, a good friend, an author, a speaker, a comedian. Yes, you can find his stand-up comedian specials on Amazon.com. What is that? The Deplorable Mind. Welcome back to the show, Evan Sayet. How are you, Evan?
I am terrific, and actually it's on Amazon Prime. It's called Evan Sayet, A Deplorable Mind. It's my hour-long, special like all the other comedians get, and go check it out.
Yeah, it's fantastic, and it's just as prevalent today. I know you recorded it a couple of years ago, but it's even more prevalent today. But more prevalent than anything is your newest book, The Woke Supremacy, an Anti-Socialist Manifesto. And I want to get into this because a new book from Evan Sayet is exciting everybody. You are prolific in the way that you just skewer the mainstream, the left, and everybody in between, because, we're in a place right now, Evan, and I really want your input on this. We're in a place right now where even just having a dialogue like you and I are right now, we could be canceled. We're done for if the woke crowd disagrees with you, correct?
Right. I mean, we are, in fact, we're not coining a phrase here. We're living in a cancel culture. Where you are simply taken off the board if you cross the woke in any fashion. I mean, if there's any hope at this moment, it's that, the famous expression, revolutions eat their own. And we're starting to see some of the people who use these tactics against us are now seeing that, in these kinds of supremacies, and woke supremacy is a supremacy. It's a supremacist movement. Nobody is safe. It's just one transgression and you go from being a good and loyal member of the supremacy to being as hated as anybody who's on the outside, the people I call the others.
Like whom?
Well, let's just take, for example, Jimmy Fallon.
Okay.
Jimmy Fallon made the mistake of tasseling Donald Trump's hair. And
Yeah.
instantly, he went from the #1 late night talk show host. They not only tuned him out, turned him off, would not appear on his show, because the word that they used time and again was that by doing that, Fallon had humanized Donald Trump. You see, and in the supremacy, the other, whether it was a Jew in Nazi Germany, whether it was a black and Democratic Party run south of old, the other is not allowed to ever be seen even as a human being. And if you are, you must be deplorable. You must be there must be nothing good about you. And by having Trump on the show and just treating him like he'd treat any other guest, he didn't go out of his way. Jimmy Fallon was Jimmy Fallon. Well, the next day he received emails. I mean, instantly he received all kinds of threats. And he finally asked, in response to the Twitter storm against him, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to kill myself? This is a guy who the day before and for the past 30 years was their friend, their colleague, their fellow social justice warrior, but he made the mistake of humanizing the other.
You're a comedian. You've done stand-up, and very good stand-up, and I've seen you several times.
Oh, it's the best.
It's fantastic.
There's nobody better.
There's nobody better. So, Evan, we're looking at a time right now where you've got a few standouts. You've got your Joe Rogans, your Adam Carollas, your Dennis Millers. And by the way, Joe Rogan and Adam Carolla are no conservatives, but they're just more common sense. But they don't care. As Joe Rogan says, if you've got FU money, you can say what you want. You don't care. But one of the things...
I have so much money, I can buy all the letters, not just the F and the U.
That's why you get paid the big bucks. So talk to me a little bit about the state of comedy right now, right? Because, I mean, if you tweeted something back in 2015 or 2010, you're no longer allowed to host the Oscars.
Right. I mean, and that's one of the things about the cancel culture is it doesn't even have to be a current transgression. If they can find anything in your past, anything at any time to use against you, that's what supremacies do. They're not looking for justice. They're not looking for truth. They're not looking for evolution and growth. They're not looking for candor. They're looking for an excuse to add you to that train heading towards the camp. And look, it's very difficult for a comedian on our side anyway, partly because where do you get seen? Right? In the old days, if I had something I was promoting, you could go on Letterman or Leno or the late night talk shows. But where is a political comedian going to go on late night television to be seen? There's just no opportunity there. Then you get to the comedy clubs. And it's not even like the comedy club owners are on the other side. They're not. They're with us. They're small businessmen and women trying to earn a living. They know how to balance it. But they also know that out of all the comedians that are out there, you come with trouble. You come with other comedians who will say, I'm not going to work with that Nazi. I'm not going to work with that fascist. Or I'm not going to work in your club. I'm going to go across the street to the other guy's club now. So just as a business decision, it's wise. And we see this in corporate America. And that's probably what scares me the most, that they own the schools and they own the social communications and they own news. But the fact that the people who base their decisions on the bottom line, the corporations, now see that there's more money to be made in promoting the anti-American lies than there is in promoting American values and the truth. You look at Colin Kaepernick. That whole Nike campaign is a fraud. Colin Kaepernick isn't in the NFL because he sucks. All right, he had 1.5 good seasons, very good seasons, but very quickly his skills deteriorated, his mindset deteriorated. So he went from inheriting a Super Bowl quality team. They went to the Super Bowl the year he took over for an injured starting quarterback. I think it was Alex Smith. The next year, just barely made it to the playoffs. The year after, didn't even make the playoffs. And by the time he was finally benched, he was leading a 4-12 team. That was so. This idea that he was benched or taking a knee, he took a knee because he was already benched.
Yeah. Last question on the comedy circuit for you, because you're one of the few comedians that I know that are out. You basically don't care. I grew up, like many did, watching Pryor and Carlin and listening to the Cheech and Chong on the records. And even folks like Sam Kinison, I remember in the 80s that were well beyond they're ahead of their time. Do you think any of those guys would last today?
I don't think there's any opportunity. The only opportunity is blah, blah, blah. Conservatives are bad. There's no other punchline that you can have except for, and I actually went to the comedy club to see a friend, a young friend of a friend, and one after another, after another, after another. There was no wit, there was no turn of a phrase, there was no cleverness. It was all either, isn't Donald Trump evil?
Yeah.
Or sex. Just and look, I got nothing against a good sex joke. The key there is the word good, not the word sex. I am so not easily offended, even by jokes at my expense, whether it's a joke about being Jewish, whether it's a joke about being a Republican, a conservative, whatever, as long as the joke is good. And, you know, Dave, that was one of the reasons I was able to write for so many different people, so different in and of themselves. I mean, whether it was Arsenio Hall, I mean, come on, I was the voice of Black America for 2 years. Or whether it was the Oak Ridge Boys, as redneck and white and hicky as you could get. The Oak Ridge Boys Live from Las Vegas was a show. Whether it was as leftist or liberal as Bill Maher's Politically Incorrect, which I wrote for several years, or something so right as the cult classic Win Ben Stein's Money. And the reason is that at its foundation, its kernel, a joke is a joke is a joke is a joke.
Yeah. And I said this to you last time you were on the show. I don't know if it was this or the radio, but so Jimmy Kimmel's your fault.
And in fact, I was one of the people, I mean, it was my show that first brought him to television. Yeah, Bill Maher's my fault. Bill Maher's my fault too. Right?
Yeah. So I lied to you because, you know, I said we'll move on from comedy, but so you talked about Fallon and the tussling of Trump's hair. Jimmy Kimmel especially, and Colbert, right? Stephen Colbert is the third one. I don't watch them anymore. I never really did. I haven't really watched late night shows since Jay was on, and obviously I grew up watching Johnny, not to age myself. But are these guys even funny anymore? I mean, is it just that I see Jimmy Kimmel and he's talking about Obamacare and he's just patronizing people and screaming at people?
Yeah.
There's no funny in that, right?
There's no funny in it. There's no cleverness. There's no witticism. There's no turn of a phrase. The expression that I've used, and I probably used it on your show before, is that they've replaced humor with vitriol.
Yeah.
And in fact, the great Christopher Hitchens was on Bill Maher's show. And he said, "Ma, you're not funny." He said, "I can do what you do." And he turned to the audience and he said, "George Bush is Hitler." And the crowd cheered. See?
It's easy.
It's easy. Anybody can do it.
Yeah, yeah. Let's get to your book here, because the Woke Supremacy, I was very fortunate and honored that you shared with me a little bit of it before it went out, and
it's a much better title than last time I was on your show. The working title. Do you remember the working title last time?
Got it.
I believe it was Bernie Sanders, and how Bernie Sanders is like Hitler.
Yes, it's sort of.
Sort of.
Yeah, qualifier.
There was a parentheses and an asterisk.
Yeah, that's right. It's the Woke Supremacy, the Anti-Socialist Manifesto. And you've written some great books before this, The Kindergarten of Eden, How the Modern Liberal Thinks. You've got the children's book that's still out there, doing really well on climate change, Apocalypse Now. And your articles have been prolific, whether it's townhall.com or your speeches for the Heritage Foundation and the like. You're a fantastic writer. And as I'm going through this with what you shared with me before it became published, you talk about the idea of democratic socialism and how it exists today. So we've got a couple of breaking news stories this week I want you to discuss. First of all, we got Kamala Harris, who the Washington Post and the New York Times both said that she ran an awful campaign just 5 or 6 months ago. She basically put her finger in the wind and couldn't figure out who she is. And now they're just lauding her praises. And she is, in essence, basically carrying the Bernie Sanders wing of the Democrat Party, which is now the Democrat Party, right?
Yeah, there are no longer any centrists in the Democratic Party. If they are, they've been stifled, they've been quieted. You look at Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. Now, they're not left-wing fanatics; they're prostitutes. They like the money and the power and the prestige and being on camera and whatnot. And they will go whatever way the party and whatever way history says they should go. So now they're on their knees with the dashiki and apologizing for being white and doing what they So they've been cowed. And it was funny when Nancy Pelosi tried for a moment to reel in the squad, the first thing the squad did to her was call her sexist and call her a racist. And that shut her up, because it's interesting, because the prostitutes are stuck between a rock and a hard place. They can't fight the radical left because the radical left has too much power, and they can't join with the right because that's the end of them. Who needs them as Democrats anymore? So they're really, I don't know what happens to a Pelosi and a Schumer and anybody from the old school prostitutional wing of the Democratic Party. Joe Biden is just a placeholder. He's an empty vessel. It's Kamala who's going to be the president, and it's not going to be Kamala. It's going to be the people around her, of course. But this election is between the socialist system and the national/capitalist system. It's America versus all the enemies that we've had for the past 100 years. We fought the Nazis, the German socialists. The Cold War was against the Soviet socialists. The Vietnam War was to prevent the further spread of Chinese socialism. And now in America, it's the nationalists, those of us who want to make America great again, versus those who think America was never great and who want to bring to America the same system, not the same ideology, but the same system of socialism. Government-owned essential industries, government controlled by regulations, all non-essential industries. The same system that was Leninism, Stalinism, Maoism, and Hitlerism. It's the same system.
Mm-hmm. You're a speechwriter. You've written speeches for President Donald Trump. I think we all look at the campaign as of this week and realize that it's essentially now Donald Trump versus Kamala Harris for president. Even most Democrats don't think that Joe Biden's going to last the full first term. So
not even close,
right?
So if he's anything more than simply a puppet, very soon the 25th Amendment will be invoked, and rightly so this time. Rightly so that it'll be pursued, because clearly he's. I've never been a fan, but I've never been a hater of his. But clearly there is dementia there. I mean, I don't want to make a diagnosis, but there's a loss of mental capacity.
Yeah, no doubt. And most Democrats quietly will admit that to you, although the media won't. But my question for you is this. If you're writing for President Trump right now during the campaign, how should he deal with Kamala? He kind of went quiet this week a little bit, and he didn't really attack her. Do you leave that to Vice President Pence? And does Vice President Pence have that attack dog mentality?
I don't think so. I think there's always been sort of a tradition and in American politics that when the other person's convention is going on, or when the other person is announcing who their VP running mate is, you step back and give them their one or two moments in the sun. You certainly don't give them the time to define themselves before you define them. But it's always been the way that during the other person's convention, you lay low, and vice versa. He'll be coming out, no doubt. And look, I don't know that it's really Trump versus Kamala or Trump versus Biden even. It's America versus Portland. It's America versus what's going on in Seattle. It's America where we live in peace with each other, as we have and have been for so many decades now. We're the most multicultural nation in the history of the world. And the fact that we are as peaceful and we coexist and cooperate as much and as well as we do. And now it's really, do you want a future that is Seattle? Do you want a future that's Chaz? Do you want a future that's Portland or Minneapolis? Or do you want to make America great again?
So it comes back to your book. I mean, this is what
it all comes
socialism
back to
versus, right? Free market.
Yeah, that's what this is.
And freedom.
100 years ago, three things happened almost simultaneously that created the modern world. There was World War I, which left the most advanced cultures in the world physically decimated and financially incapacitated. It just, the stupidity of the war, the horror of the war, and the fact that they couldn't extricate themselves from the stupid war left that system of governance just invalid. It was no longer an acceptable. Just then, two new systems of governance appeared on the world stage. One was, for the first time, Marx's theory of socialism was put into practice with the Russian Revolution. And at almost that exact moment, America had matured, and with the devastation of the European nations, came on the world stage as a power for the first time. And it was American nationalism versus Marx's socialism. And as I said earlier, for the next 100 years, those two diametrically opposed, mutually exclusive forms of governance were the last two. Which one was going to, be embraced by the world? And the Nazis tried it, and we had to defeat them. The Soviets tried it, and we had to defeat them. And with the fall of the Berlin Wall and then the collapse of the Soviet Union, it was generally believed that fight was over. The world had finally found the best possible means of governance, system of governance. It was nationalism, where local leaders look after their local citizenry with firsthand knowledge of local issues, versus the globalist socialism. Socialism is always globalist. If you look at Karl Marx, he said, he said workers of the world unite. He didn't say the workers of Russia. He didn't say the workers of Georgia or Ukraine or what. He said the workers of the world unite. So it's been this globalist vision with one big government that has all the money, all the power, all the resources, or nationalist states. And in fact, America went even one better and had just states within the nation.
See, this is why I love talking with you, Evan, because although you're a snarky cuss at times, you give us a really good perspective of world history. I always thought of, everything that we're seeing today coming from the last 50 years of the leftists, basically attaching themselves to the institutions. But what you're talking about is going all the way back to, what, Woodrow Wilson?
Right. I mean, it was when the world had left itself without a reasonable form of governance. There were other forms of governance, and they still exist, and they still suck. Whether it's Islamism, where it's centered around those who are devout, where power is centered around those who are devout, or whether it's tribalism, where the centers of power center around people based on blood and family. Nationalism ignores all of those things. See, socialism has always had, depending on the specific ideology, a supremacist group, a supreme group. With Hitler, it was white supremacy. It was the Aryans. All right, with the Soviets and Lenin, it was class superiority. It was the working class that was superior, that was endowed with the traits that would bring about the perfect world. In the Middle East, in the Islamic world, it's religion that's the superior trait. Well, what bonds Americans together and nationalists together is nothing other than the fact that you have shared topographies, you've got shared local interests, you've got shared weather patterns, you've got shared needs and concerns, and nothing else matters other than that. If you are a member of this nation, you are entitled to every right of this nation. It's not if you are white you're entitled to. It's not if you're a Muslim you're entitled to. It's not if you're the middle class you're entitled to. It's if you're an American you're entitled to.
You talk about supremacy from that standpoint. You also go into how it is being seen in the United States. And obviously, it's the socialist wing of the Democrat Party, which is now, I don't even call it a wing anymore. They are the Democrats. The Democrats are represented, right?
They're the entire party. Stifled.
Yeah, and within the government, we're seeing this coming from a perspective of how the elites see the rest of the country. And breaking news today, folks, if you're not listening this over the weekend, this is Friday being recorded. FBI lawyer Kevin Kleinsmith, he just apparently, we are looking at breaking news right now that he has pled guilty in the Durham probe to falsifying the FISA warrant against Carter Page,
which started it all.
This is what began it all, right? And we're talking about the elite deep state. This is the supremacy from within those that are within the government, those that are within the media. They work to in essence carry the water for these people. And when you've got the New York Times, Evan, today having to admit that John Durham's probe into the FBI's now debunked probe of President Donald Trump and Russia, this is the New York Times saying this, maybe all of a sudden this house of cards is starting to fall. What do you see happening right now with this? And are you going to grab the popcorn like I am?
Well, look, you have to hope so. I fear that we have passed already any sense of that justice, not that it will prevail, but that the other side could give a damn. You know, that one thing about supremacist movements is that everything is for the supremacy. They don't necessarily believe the lies, but they promote the lies because it promotes the supremacy. You know, we were talking about the deep state. You look at Nancy Pelosi, who supports policies that allow illegal immigrants to come in and not look after. She's not looking after the best interests of the people of her district, which she has a sworn oath to do. Right? She puts illegal aliens ahead of the well-being, the health, and the safety and security of the people that she's charged with. That she put her hand on the Bible and swore an oath to look after. But that's not the way supremacists see the world. Supremacists see the world as, if they don't agree, if they don't have our supreme trait, then they don't deserve any of the protections, any of the rights that we would give to others. For example, in the Islamicist world, if you're not a Muslim, you're not entitled to the same rights. In fact, you're not even entitled to liberty and life. You know, if you look in the Old South where the Democrats were in charge, all right, you aren't a fellow Alabaman, you aren't a fellow member of the city or whatever. You were black and you were white, and if you were white, you had the rights, and if you were black, you had none. And that's exactly the way the democratic socialists see this. They are not Americans. As globalists, they consider themselves citizens of the world. And therefore, their allegiance and their oath isn't to the Constitution of a nation. There's no nationalist document that matters to them. And you see this when you have the President of the United States, Barack Obama, using the FBI and weaponizing it against fellow Americans, weaponizing the IRS against fellow Americans. Right? That's because, as a woke supremacist, he believes that his ideology should trump his constitutional oaths and his responsibilities.
So it's interesting that you say that, because we're seeing so many geopolitical shifts happening right now. Trump wants to pull some troops out of Germany, still leave 25,000 there. That's still a lot. Obviously, Afghanistan, we're seeing that we're now getting treaties between Israel and the UAE, and other Middle Eastern states are probably going to go in the same vein. Yet we hear either A, crickets, or B, that it's just completely discounted by the left. So are they looking for, see, this is where the disconnect happens for me. Maybe you can explain it, Evan. Mm-hmm. If we are going to be globalist and we want to share the equity of power across the globe, why is it that they are looking at situations like the Middle East Treaty this week, and they're either treating it as if it's bad because Orange Band is bad, or they're just going quiet about it? Wouldn't you be celebrating something like that?
No, because the very first thing that you have to do, if you're fomenting a revolution, if you want to overthrow the system that exists and replace it with your utopian ideology, the first thing you have to do is destroy the system as it is. So the last thing they want is peace. Yeah, the last thing they want is peace in the Middle East, which is why it would seem so odd that every other socialist entity that has ever been has sided with the Islamicists. And let me be clear: Islamicists are Muslims, or not all Muslims are Islamicists. Right? In fact, Muslims who do not show the right degree of piety are often victimized by the Islamicists. Mm. Right? But Hitler joined with the Islamicists, the Mufti of Jerusalem, during World War II. That seems odd, because Hitler hated Semites. Arabs are Semites. Right? The Russians and the Soviet Union were the biggest benefactors to the Islamicists during the Cold War. That seems odd, because Soviet socialism despises religion, yet the Islamicists are fanatically religious. Today, the Democrats side with the Islamicists, even though they throw gays off of roofs and subjugate women. That just seems odd. But once you recognize that all of these groups have one thing in common, before they can have their supreme idea take over the world, whether it's that global caliphate, whether it's a global world like John Lennon imagined, of the imagination, they first have to destroy the world as it is. Mm-hmm. And if you look at their policies, no matter where it is, releasing criminals from jail, taking guns away from the good people, defunding the police while they lower bail to zero, Everything that they do is designed to try to destroy the world as it is, because then only upon the ashes can they then build the various utopia
Yeah.
that they all imagine.
Yeah. Last question for you, Evan. I greatly appreciate you spending time with us as always. When you talk about the woke supremacy, you're talking about the fact that America is at the brink of a second civil war. Some people will say we're not at the brink. We're actually in it right now. We just don't have muskets pointed at each other. Talk to me a little bit about projecting what we're seeing right now, or prognosticating right now what we're going to be seeing in about 80 days, November the 3rd.
Yeah, I see 4 possible scenarios. 3 of them lead to real violence in the street, and the 4th leads to only somewhat less violence in the street. The only way to avoid an all-out bloody conflagration, I think, is if Trump and the Republicans win overwhelmingly. So overwhelmingly that the radical left is repudiated. The prostitutes in the left, Pelosi and Schumer, for example, now sticking their finger in the wind, have to come more towards what Democrats once were, fellow Americans who simply preferred higher taxes and more government regulation. That, I believe, will somewhat mitigate the violence, because the other side, the radical left, is not going to give up. They're just going to revert to what they were in the 60s, murderers and bomb throwers and terrorists and all the things that the founders of this movement were.
Or they're underground.
Anything short of that, if they win, we're not going to sit back and not do anything while they use the government against us. If we win, they're not going to accept the results of the election any more than they did 4 years ago. And so I really just think at some point it's going to have to come to duking it out.
What does that look like to you?
It certainly doesn't mean troops. It's not like the original Civil War where there were battle lines, where there were uniforms, where it was the blue and the gray, and it was territory, the North, and then you went to the South. It's because we're all commingled and intermingled. I suspect it's more like guerrilla warfare. I think it's more like, I think one thing we have to do is go into the schools and pull out some of those people who are, look, they've declared war, literally. The founders of this movement, Bernardine Dohrn, married to William Ayers, the founders of the terrorist group, the Weather Underground, so vile, so violent, at their very first meeting, they took a moment to applaud Charles Manson.
Yeah,
that's the founders of this movement. And Bernardine Dohrn approached a bank of microphones and said, "Hi, I'm Bernardine Dohrn, and I am going to read to you a declaration of war." Right? Over the years, they have made it clear that this is what they seek, to foment a revolution, to foment violence that will lead to the revolution. And when Barack Obama says he intends to fundamentally transform, and Bernie Sanders uses the word, "come join the revolution," and when they declare themselves the resistance to a duly elected president, then they've declared war. And we've got to no longer consider them our colleagues and our fellow Americans. The oath you take is to enemies, foreign and domestic.
Everybody go check out the Woke Supremacy, the Anti-Socialist Manifesto, and his other books as well, Kindergarten of Eden especially. Evan, tell everybody where they can find you in the book.
Everything is always at evansayet.com, EVANS as in Sam, AYET.com. The books are always at Amazon, of course, and on my comedy video, Evan Sayet, A Deplorable Mind, is free if you have Amazon Prime.
Yeah, and it's great. I've watched it a couple of times, and try and find your. Are you on YouTube? Do you have any of your stand-up on YouTube?
I don't have my own channel, but there are bits, there are clips. One good thing about my name is nobody else has it.
Yeah.
Sayet, S-A-Y-E-T, is if somebody's named Sayet, they're related to me. And then you put the Evan in front of it and just Google Evan Sayet, and you'll find everything Evan Sayet.
Well, you're in good company. My youngest son is named after you, and one of my best friends is named after you as well. And you are one of my closest friends as well. So I've got a lot of Evans in my life, and it's a good thing. Evan Sayet, everybody check him out at evansayet.com. Everybody also check out the Woke Supremacy. I've got to tell you, it's a quick read, but it is concentrated. It is packed, and you'll sit down and read through it, and it is witty as always. Evan, thank you so much for joining us. Greatly appreciate it.
My pleasure, Dave. Good to see you.
Likewise. Thanks, Evan. You know, I talk with a lot of good friends of mine about this idea of a civil war. No matter what happens, one way or another on Election Day 2020, is there going to be a civil war? Do we see that spill out into the streets as we've seen come from the left over the past few months now? It can't believe it's been a few months that we're still seeing these continued rallies and protests and looting and the like. But I find that to have a proper civil war, you have to have two warring sides. And we only have one side right now that's actually in the streets. And whether or not they're being contained by law enforcement, that's arguable. But an interesting thing happened. You know, it didn't make a lot of news. You had 250,000 people show up to Sturgis, South Dakota, right, recently for this incredible motorcycle rally. And, you know, when you take a look at those numbers of people that showed up, what didn't we see? We didn't see Antifa and the crazy leftists showing up and protesting. Why? Because when people do show force, when people do stand up and say, not on my watch, many of these cowards just run away back into the shadows. And they are cowards. Many of them are young kids, and they're being enabled by our leftists, mayors and governors who essentially are giving them free rein. Did anybody see this week? It kind of came and went in the news that the Portland Attorney General is not going to be charging any of the looters that have been protesting and breaking down the glass of stores and businesses and private property. No charges. You know, so in essence, what the government is doing, these leftist governments, these mayors and the governors that are overseeing these mayors, is essentially saying, go for it. Do whatever it is that you want to do. Get it out of your system. If we come in and fight you guys, it's only going to escalate. And these young kids that haven't molded their minds yet are saying, holy cow, it's like being allowed to go into Walmart for 20 minutes and pick up anything you want for free. Who wouldn't do that if you knew that you weren't going to get in trouble? So this is their psychology right now, and this is their incentive and their motivation. And it isn't new. We saw what happened in the 1992 riots, you know, under Rodney King. Maxine Waters was there. She was the one that was leading those riots. Remember the signs? No justice, no peace, no justice, no peace. She was a city councilwoman at the time before she became a congressperson. And so people were looking at her saying, oh, wait a minute. You know, she's the one in charge here, and she's telling us we can do what we want to do. And that's exactly what's happening right now in Portland and Seattle and downtown Los Angeles and New York City and St. Louis and Atlanta and other leftist-run cities. Well, our next guest wants to take Maxine Waters' seat and give it back to the people and come from a perspective of common sense. And that is Joe Collins. Joe Collins is running for Congress in the 43rd District, Maxine Waters' district. And we welcome Joe back to the show. I think we've had him on radio before. Joe Collins, how are you, buddy?
I'm well, man. How about yourself?
I'm doing really good. You can hear me. Everything's good, right?
Yes, I can hear you just fine.
Okay, great. Awesome. Joe Collins running for 43rd Congressional District against Maxine Waters in Southern California. Election's just coming up here. We're just over 80 days. How you feeling?
I feel very good. I feel confident. We have a great team. We have a lot of momentum and a lot of support from our community, a lot of support from the people of the United States. I feel really good about this.
Talk to us a little bit about, for people all across the country and actually across the world who listen to us, a little bit about your district and who Maxine Waters is.
Well, I'm in the 43rd Congressional District of California. It consists of Inglewood, South Central, Watts, Hawthorne, Gardena. We have half of Torrance. We have Lenox. We have Westchester Airport area. We have, what else? We have Harbor City, we have Lomita, and we have a little bit of West Carson. Maxine Waters is like the loudmouth of the West. I mean, she's a ridiculous person. She's made her whole entire career of playing with people's emotions to get them to believe that everything that happens is the Republicans' fault, even though she's done absolutely nothing to provide any type of opportunity or economic advantage for the people in our communities. We live in a very poor district, and I love to change that.
What are you getting as far as feedback from the folks in the community? Obviously, this is a heavy lift for any Republican, anybody with an R next to their name. But you grew up in that district. You served in the U.S. Navy, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And this is where you work and live. And you're not an interloper. And from what I understand, Maxine doesn't even live in her own district. Is that correct?
Yeah, Maxine doesn't live in the district. She has a few houses. She has a few really nice houses. She's done a very good job, making sure her family and herself is rich, and she left a lot of the community hanging. And I think one thing that a lot of Republicans wasn't betting on is the fact that, I'm from South Central Los Angeles. So the majority of the people that live in a district, they actually came up under my grandfather, who used to have the largest Black church before Black churches was a thing. So now I'm back home, from the Navy 2.5 years, and now people are starting to gravitate towards me, with me running for Congress. So the feedback is very positive. A lot of people are telling me they're sick of Maxine Waters, but they weren't going to vote for anybody they couldn't identify with. And so I think it's a good thing. We have a very diverse team, not in ethnicity, but we have a very diverse team when it comes to political party preference. I mean, we have Democrats, Republicans, Independents, Libertarians, Green Party members. We have a little bit of everything on my campaign team. And it just shows the type of leader that I am, that people are willing to follow me and trust me to, work with the White House, work with our president to make things happen for our community.
Let's talk about the diversity there for a minute. And I want to get into diversity, not of skin color, but of thought. And that's verboten right now by many on the left, many in our mainstream media, that if you disagree with their mantra, their Marxist ideology today, then you should be canceled. You're a Black guy living in South Central, and you're a Republican. What's been the reaction to you?
You know what? At first, some people were kind of torn because I'm Black. I am a Republican. I'm from the inner city, but I want better for the inner city. But, because we've been doing so many great things for the communities, the people, they take to me pretty well. And I make it a point to be, 100% honest when I talk to people about the issues in our communities and what's been going on and what we could do to fix it. And it opened people up a lot. I mean, we're hurting right now because of COVID-19 is shut down, especially in South LA. It's a, very poor community. So we've been able to get food. We just had a job fair yesterday. At our office, we do food drives, food banks at 5 or 6 different locations throughout the district, and people actually see that I care. I think in a district like mine, it's not about political party preference. It's about how you can connect best with the people, how you can connect best with the children, and what can we do to work together to improve the quality of life for the people who live in the district.
You say that it isn't about party preference, but Maxine Waters has been winning since the 1990s with over 80% of the vote. Mm-hmm. She's got a D next to her name, and a lot of people vote basically straight party line. So are you having discussions? Are you talking to people? Are people asking you, how could you be a Republican? Are Republicans racist? And all the, the propaganda that we hear. How are you speaking with people? What are you talking about? What are the issues that you're illuminating people about, especially when it pertains to the local area?
Yeah, you're right. A lot of people do ask me, why are you Black and Republican? And, I have to tell them, because of the period of history of the Republican Party. I mean, you look at it, they fought to end slavery. They fought for your rights. They fought for everything that had to do with equality. And you get the Democratic Party, who's been a proponent of racism, proponent of slavery, and that still holds true today. There's nothing changed except the way the game is played. And I also asked him, can you name one thing that the Democratic Party has done to improve your life, even if you think there was a switch, even if you think that the Democrats are now for people of color? If they are, what type of restitution have you gotten from the Democratic Party? And why do you live in the conditions that you live in? You got the poorest education, you got the poorest communities, we don't have quality jobs, just basic things that people see every day but don't think about. And, they still try to blame Republicans. And I asked them, well, when the last time we had a Republican prevalent in the community? And I tell them I can't think of anybody in the last 60 years. And so if Republicans are the problem, then why do we have so many Black Democratic leaders, Latino Democratic leaders that are failing to do anything for you right now? And you don't think it's time for a change? And people honestly agree with that. And when it comes to Maxine Waters and her winning, everybody thinks that she wins big. And I've been saying this from the jump. Maxine Waters has never won big. She gets 80% of the people who come out to vote, but that's not 80% of the people who live in a district. It's only a 23% voter turnout that we have. I mean, 757,000 people that live in the district, 400,000 people registered to vote. She wins with 160,000 votes, 170,000 votes. That's not impressive to me. That's not a huge accomplishment to me. Our goal right now, beating Maxine Waters, we have 3 offices in the district right now. We put 1 office in the area where Maxine Waters get the majority of the votes, so we can attack that area and we can let people know that you guys are poor, Maxine Waters is rich. And then, we work our way down to the people who are most likely to vote for us while targeting a new voter base, young people. Our median age is 34, people feeling like they're not being heard, people who don't get involved in politics, but they have issues that need to be resolved. So we've been very productive, very fortunate to be able to do the things that we're doing and have a team that, we have that we're running pretty good.
We've got Joe Collins, who's running for the 43rd Congressional District in the state of California, a state that we saw 7 congressional districts that voted Republican in 2018 that were overturned over the next few days to few weeks due to ballot mail harvesting. I want to get your opinion on all of that in just a moment here, but drop your website where people can find and support you as we're talking here.
My website is joecollinsforcongress.com.
Okay, so this is an issue. This is something that Donald Trump is now talking about. We are seeing a major effort by those on the left to try to promulgate mail-in balloting. We can go to the supermarket. We can line up and do all sorts of different things in different places. We can protest in the streets. I don't understand the disconnect here, Joe. Explain to me this push for the voter ballot mail-in voting that they're trying to do, and how dangerous is that right now?
I think that when it comes to the whole mail-in voter situation, Democrats, they have a plan to be able to capture the votes that they need in order to win, especially when you talk about the ability to have all of the ballots go to a central location. And we don't know what happens once the ballots get to the post office. They can open the ballots up and they can count the ballots and see who are voting for which and try to sway the election whichever way they want to. But I think in any aspect of voting, whether you mail in your ballots in or going to the polls, the idea of cheating is always going to be prevalent. I think for a lot of candidates that are running, especially Republican candidates, I think while keeping ballot harvesting, while keeping voter fraud in the back of our minds and planning for that, I think one of our top goals is to recruit. We have to influence, and we have to campaign as hard as we can, so we can create a new voter base, and we can influence as many people as possible. Because I think in California, for at least every single district is almost the same. 700,000 people. You have 700,000 people. That gives you 700,000 chances to win an election. And if you don't win, it's probably because you didn't work hard enough. And I think that we need to outline our plans. We need to outline ways that we can influence people on every single scale and make it happen. I know for my team, we're absolutely, worried about creating a new voter base. We're worried about influencing as many people as we can, but we also have that in the back of our minds. We're not going to forget about it. We're going to plan for it, but we're going to win our election with overwhelming numbers because of the work that we're putting in with our campaign.
Joe, voter harvesting, this is where anybody, you don't have to be an official employee or agent or representative of any campaign. Anybody can go to somebody's house and say, I can take your ballot to the precinct. You can give it to me. This is legal in the state of California. It is illegal in other states, including North Carolina, where last year they actually had to have a special election because voter harvesting was used, and they had to redo that election. But in California, it is legal, and the Democrats in California use it to their advantage. Again, we had 7 elections overturned in 2018 of congressional candidates Republicans won on election night, but over the next several weeks to month, they were overturned. Is that something that you, as a candidate, because it is legal, is looking at as an option, as a tool that you can use? And if so, what exactly is it that you will be doing?
Well, I'll tell you this. I'm going to give California the benefit of the doubt on this one. They want to give everybody the opportunity to vote and everybody the opportunity to get your ballots to the precincts any way possible, by any means necessary, as Malcolm X says. And I can also tell you this. One thing that Republicans has done in the past, and that's failed to play by the same playbook that the Democrats and certain areas are playing by. And I think that we need to adopt the same playbook and do the same things that they're doing, because obviously they have strongholds on certain areas that Republicans don't have. And I think that if we copy the same things that the Democrats are doing, Republicans can be successful as well. I can't say that is something that we will do, but what I can say is that I don't think it's a bad idea to copy a playbook, especially if they make it legal to copy.
Why wouldn't you? If I was a candidate, I would be studying exactly what my enemies are doing, okay, what my competitors are doing. If they're doing it well, which the Democrats did very well in 2018, I would absolutely emulate that. Why wouldn't you?
Well, from a candidate's perspective, we have to look at the legal and moral aspects of things that we do when it comes to our campaigns. To be completely transparent, it is a good idea. But we'll see what happens within the next couple of weeks. Okay.
All right. Next issue for you, and I wanted to get your impression. We're going back to the diversity of thought. Well, for the Democrats right now, diversity is nothing about thought, but it's all about skin color. And a year or so ago, I called that it was going to be Biden-Harris, and I said it was going to be Harris because it was all about identity politics. And then Biden, said sometime during the debate that he was going to choose a woman, probably a woman of color, and they whittled it down to Kamala Harris. Now, you're from the state of California. She's a senator from the state of California. She was the attorney general from the state of California. She came up through, the San Francisco office under Willie Brown. Literally. Give me your impression as far as two aspects of Kamala Harris. The aspect of the history that the media are fawning over right now, the first female of color on a presidential ticket, and B, who Kamala Harris truly is, and what do you think that's going to do for the Biden administration should they be elected?
Okay, let's tackle A first. I don't know why the Democrats always think that playing a race card is going to help them. I think we're past that right now. And that was a politically poor move. That was a morally poor move on the part of the Democratic Party, but it was to be expected. I think they could have chose a better candidate. They could have chose a Stacey Abrams or a Cory Booker or another person of color who has a fairly clean record. It's hard to find a Democratic Party these days. So they failed on that one, epic fail. And when you talk about the moral obligation to choose someone of color based on a record, you absolutely fail with Kamala Harris. Her being a state senator in California, she was completely atrocious. She was a fraud. She was a liar. And, in certain aspects, she's the same as Joe Biden. Joe Biden wrote the crime bill that incentivized mass incarceration of Black and Latinos in inner cities, and she facilitated that same sentiment with what she was doing, withholding evidence from people who are on death row, locking people up for truancy because they can't get their children to school on time, locking people up for marijuana uses while she used marijuana use, and also, sleeping her way to the top. She slept her way to the top. Joe Biden felt his way to the top with the little girls. I mean, birds of a feather flock together. Joe Biden's a racist. Kamala Harris' family has racist origins. They used to own slaves. So, I mean, for Joe Biden, that was a safe pick for Joe Biden. For the DNC, it was a piss poor pick. For America, I don't see those two getting in the office, so I'm not worried about it. I think our president will wipe the floor with both of them, and I'm going to help him too.
You don't think they win?
No, of course not. I'm going to say DNC because we know Joe Biden is not making any type of decisions with his decline in cognitives. I mean, I want to talk a lot of trash, but I'm trying to be nice. that was a poor decision. It was so many black people that were in the upward, especially from the inner cities, knowing what she did to us in California. And I can't see any black people supporting, maybe women of color, because, you know, they want to identify with another black woman that's successful. But you can't be pro-black and talk about how wonderful black men is if you're a black woman, and then, you know, go choose somebody who has no problem with sentencing black men and Latino men on death row, locking black people up with pure impunity. You just can't do it.
So do people know this? Because again, I agree with you. I think a lot of people are just going to be like, oh, Kamala's just one of us. And it's because of her identity and because of her gender. Mm-hmm. That's it. That's as deep as they go. But so the media are already whitewashing. Washington Post, not more than 6 or 7 months ago, when Kamala's failing campaign just fizzled out, they said that she was a lousy campaigner, she was inauthentic, she didn't have a message, she changed with the wind, and they were right. Mm-hmm. They were right. She was basically the John Kerry of 2020. You know, I was for that bill before I was against that bill. That was the way now she's a brave, patriotic woman of color that's going to be, I mean, it's nauseating if you read the Washington Post and the New York Times right now. So will voters understand that, or do they just have such a short memory, and the Democrats already know this and are assuming that most people don't pay attention until after Labor Day anyway, and vote straight down identity politic line?
You know what? I'm going to be 100% honest with you. Tulsi Gabbard cleaned her clock, and that's something that people did not forget. So I think the Trump administration needs to go ahead and bring Tulsi Gabbard back on to the White House, give her some type of position, and just have her go after Kamala Harris 24/7. But I mean, when you look at how Kamala Harris got to where she is right now, she flip-flops, you know, positions every single chance she gets. She's an opportunist. She does what's best for her. Just like she slept her way to get to district attorney in, you know, out here in California. So it's not surprising. She's a failure. She has a failed campaign. She ran a failed campaign when she was running for president of the United States. Even Joe Biden had a failed campaign as well. The media has been pulling him, but I don't think the media can pull two failures, especially one flip-flopping failure and then another failure who can't even remember that he was a failure. So
from somebody that is south of LA, South Central LA, your district, 43rd district, a lot of people in that district were put away under the laws of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of people that served a lot of jail time for what should be at most a misdemeanor. I mean, marijuana, whatever it may be, right? And people are still serving time because of this. Do people have memories of this, or is this going to be whitewashed as well?
Oh, the people are going to have memories. They're always going to have memories. Nobody likes the fact that Joe Biden's running. Nobody likes the fact that Kamala Harris is his VP pick. Doesn't matter if she's a woman. Doesn't matter if she's black. The fact of the matter is they're terrible picks. People remember, they might not say anything, but the media is not a reflection of the people. The media is just used to sway opinions based off someone else's opinion. So, you know, MSNBC, CNN, the ratings are dropping. People are not watching that as much as they used to. They're actually reading, getting involved in our politics. And I think that's a great thing. We need more of that.
You know, I've been saying all along on this show, everybody just turn off broadcast news. Don't watch it. You won't miss any breaking news. I promise you. It will come across your phone. You'll find it on the internet, but read the sources that you trust. Nobody's watching CNN. Nobody's watching MSNBC. There's 325 million people in this country, and they're getting 600,000 viewers. Mm-hmm. So let's be realistic here. Even Fox News is the #1, and the #1 show, which is Tucker, gets between 3 and 4 million. Again, 325 million people in this country. So let's get back to you and your campaign here for a minute. You have something called a 5-point plan. I want you to go through that plan. But it's interesting. I've had you on the radio show before, and you and I have met at different events. Mm-hmm. And I understand where you're coming from regarding the problems that are now, you know, in your community in South Central. But the problems that have more or less been geographically limited to South Central and other areas over the decades are now ubiquitous across California. We're
Yeah.
seeing homelessness and violence and drugs in the suburbs, in upper middle class communities. I was down in the San Fernando Valley a few days ago, and I drove by my old home where I grew up in the 1980s, and the overpass near the home is filled with homeless people. You don't see this. This was in Woodland Hills. You didn't see this.
Yeah.
So you've got this rampant spread of urban blight that is now permeating throughout California. You're seeing it in Northern California, you're seeing it in San Diego and Orange County and the like. Talk to me a little bit about how your 5-point plan as a congressperson from California will address this, because the state government and certainly the mayors of San Francisco and Los Angeles are doing nothing but failing at this point.
Yeah, I think we're kind of living in a dictatorship type of times here in California, and I think it takes brave people to start to go after this state government in order to get them back in line with the federal constitution, because these guys are absolutely rogue. But the basis behind my 5-point plan was pretty much getting back to the basics of what it is to maintain a productive society. I mean, when we talk about economic development, when we talk about creating new jobs, expanding housing for small businesses, resources, when we talk about education and building financial literacy, improving the relationship between the law enforcement, these are things that we absolutely need to live in a productive society. And I'll tell you the 5-point plan in a few minutes, but the national issues that we have in the United States does not affect people who cannot pay bills. They do not affect people who cannot live their version of the American dream. We have this thing in the military where we talk about if a sailor cannot pay his bills, if he having issues at home, then he cannot focus at work. So the same issues, the same analogy applies. If a person can't pay their bills, if they're having problems at home, they're not focused on what's going on nationally, which is why the majority of the time I hardly talk about national issues, because it's not going to resonate with people in my district. So my 5-point plan is to rebuild the community, to support the expansion of housing and small businesses, to overhaul and improve our education system. We need to rebuild the relationship between the law enforcement and our communities. And we need to bring back quality jobs into our communities. And we also need to start providing financial literacy training so people can start to build wealth, right? So these are 5 basic things that we can do, 5 simple things that we can do as legislators to get back on track and build a productive society. Now, after we bring these things back into our communities, then these will address the majority of the issues that we have when it comes to homelessness. But we also have to stand up to our governor. We have to stand up to the mayors, and we have to be leaders. We have no balance. We have more Democrats than we do anything else, which is why they shove bills down the throats of Californians that, frankly, doesn't support Californians.
Joe, I know people can find more about your 5-point plan at your website. And again, we're going to have that under you're here on the Chiron. But last question for you, because I'm really interested in people's genesis and their backstory and where they came from and how they got to where they are now. We're seeing an ascendancy of Black conservatism in the United States. And although the media doesn't want to talk about it, recent polls, and they are consistent polls that have been going on for over probably a couple of years now, are showing that Black Americans support the policies of this president in the range of 30 to 40%, depending upon the polls that you look at. Now, I don't know how that converts to votes, but if the Democrats lose more than 8% of the Black vote to their opponent, they lose the election. And I'm not making that up. Van Jones said it himself, okay? Talk to me a little bit about your story. I know that you were in the Navy. You're a small business guy. How did you become a Republican at a time in this country when it's almost considered bravery for a Black American to display an R next to their name?
Oh yeah, it's a little rough, and I think there are certain people in our party that makes it a little harder because they don't understand that the ideologies And, you know, how people grew up, where they grew up plays a major role in the things that we believe in, our values and our morals, regardless of if we carry that R by our names. So, you know, the way I view the history of the Republican Party and the reason why I joined the Republican Party may be different from the reason why somebody in Arizona or Wisconsin will be a Republican. But, you know, being from South Central Los Angeles, growing up in an area where Democrats predominantly dominated, and, you know, we see the decline in education. We see the decline in the lack of economic development. We see decline in the quality of life. And I grew up in a lot of gang violence. I mean, gang violence was prevalent, but Democrats were also prevalent in my community as well. Our house was shot up in a drive-by, and then my mom moved us out of California. We moved to Texas whenever I was in high school as a freshman. And I joined the military in 2004. That's where I became a Republican, registered Republican. And the reason why is because our leaders and our mentors will tell us, well, you're 18, it's time for you to vote, but don't vote based on what your family's been voting for. You need to figure out the political party that you want to be a part of based on the values and the history of that party. And you need to vote for people who are going to benefit your life. And so that's when I started voting mainly for Republicans. I registered Republican. And, you know, most times I vote for people who I like, you know, regardless of the political party preference. But, you know, in the military, you can't get too involved in partisan political activity. So I got into politics in 2017. The beginning of 2017, I was a presidential candidate. I was a Republican presidential candidate, and had the option to stay in the military or get out. I had already been in 13 and a half years at the time. And so very accomplished, did a lot of great things in the military. And so time to move to the next phase of my life, which was politics. And, you know, got out the military. I got administrative separation. It was general under honorable conditions. They allowed me an opportunity to maintain my benefits and, you know, move on to the next phase. Now, one of the main reasons why I got into running for Congress was because when I got out the military, you know, people don't understand that they train you, like your whole adult life you spend in the military. You can't just turn that off and automatically become something that you've never been, which is a civilian. And, you know, very trained, very qualified, have, you know, degrees and, you know, all type of certificates to do whatever, but you still have to complete the VA process before you can take advantage of whatever opportunities that are available for you. And so I ran through my savings because I have children, still have to take care of my children, trying to maintain lifestyle in California, you know, apartments, everything is expensive out here while not having any type of income. And so I was sleeping at the lighthouse of Ranchos Palos Verdes because it's very hard to tell somebody when you get out the military and you're very successful that you don't have anywhere to go. And so that was something that I was reluctant to tell. But I would always go to Maxine Waters' office every other day to ask her for help, took her flowers, filled out job applications, internships, and I was met with silence. One thing I noticed was that the majority of veterans that were on the streets, majority of homeless people on the streets were veterans. And so after, you know, I used the Veterans Choice Act that the president signed into law so I can go to outside doctors and get my VA process sped up. And so once I got my medical retirement, I got my disability, I got everything, I jumped in there to run for Congress against Maxine Waters. She's a piss poor leader, and I don't think we deserve that. We deserve better.
Joe Collins, greatly appreciate you taking the time. It's a fascinating story. I wish you much success in your campaign. Everybody, again, find you where on social media and your website, please.
You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Collins for Congress 43. You can find me on Twitter at Joe Collins 43. My website is joecollinsforcongress.com. And thanks for having me on, Dave.
It's a pleasure having you back. And also, everybody check out you and Kent Emmons live from the Maxi Pad, where you guys sit outside her house in Hancock Park, right? Her $4.3 million home, not even in her own district. You and Kent Emmons live from the Maxi Pad. You guys, that was hilarious. I had a good time watching that.
Good.
Thanks, Joe. Greatly appreciate you taking the time. We'll have you back on. Best of luck with everything in the campaign.
All right. Thanks, Dave.
Cheers.
Oh, wow.
Thanks, Joe. And everybody check out his website and support him no matter where you are in America or even across the globe. And for those of you that are watching or listening, no matter where you are, whether it's Australia or Europe, Africa, Asia, we see you. We see you in the statistics. Thanks for watching. And greatly appreciate both Evan and Joe joining us today. We'll be back again next week. We've got another great guest lined up for you already. We're excited to talk about the breaking news as we head deeper into election 2020. I'm Dave Sussman here at Whiskey Politics. Again, follow us on all of our different platforms, and we greatly appreciate you spending time with us. Cheers.